We are overriding our standard format immediately. No casual banter today. We're bringing you breaking, highly volatile developments out of the Middle East.
Right.
At this exact moment, coordinated United States and Israeli military strikes are actively hitting targets inside Iran. Explosions are rocking multiple locations across Tehran.
And we are tracking those blast radii right now.
Yes, and crucially, these blasts are being reported in areas directly adjacent to the offices linked to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. We are launching an urgent, real-time deep dive into the massive stack of raw source intelligence, tactical reports, and diplomatic wires flooding our desks right now.
The volume of raw data coming in is staggering.
It is. And our singular mission for this deep dive is to separate the escalating geopolitical rhetoric from the stark military reality on the ground. We need to provide you with an unvarnished, immediate strategic picture of what is happening, what is burning in Tehran, and why this fundamentally alters the global security landscape.
Because looking at the initial tactical movements over the past month, the writing has been on the wall.
This was not a surprise attack.
Far from it. Look, we have been tracking a massive, sustained military buildup by coalition forces in and around the Iranian theater over the last several weeks. But the absolute clearest signal came just yesterday.
The embassy warning.
Exactly. The United States Embassy in Jerusalem issued an explicit, urgent warning instructing all non-emergency personnel to evacuate Israel immediately.
Which is unprecedented.
In military intelligence, that kind of directive is the ultimate red flag. It indicates that Allied command had locked in their operational window and anticipated severe immediate blowback. What you are tracking tonight is the execution of a highly choreographed, pre-planned military offensive.
Okay, let's get into the specifics of that offensive.
Yeah.
Looking at these unclassified targeting maps we just received from the source reports, I'm noticing a glaring tactical split in the strategy between the allies.
The divergence in target selection is frankly striking.
Right. The United States seems heavily focused on degradation. They are aggressively targeting Iran's military assets, specifically aiming to systematically dismantle their ballistic missile programs.
Hitting the exact same logistical chains they went after during the U.S.-Iran strikes in the summer of 2025.
Exactly. The Pentagon's objective clearly looks to be limiting and annihilating Iran's capacity to project conventional military threats. But Israel's targeting matrix appears to be operating on a completely different playbook.
It is.
Israel seems to be going straight for the Iranian leadership apparatus itself.
We are currently analyzing satellite imagery that strongly suggests the residential compound of the Supreme Leader has sustained a direct strike.
A direct hit on Khamenei's compound.
Yes, they are attempting a decapitation strike. In military terms, that means you aren't just cutting off the enemy's sword arm, you are going right for the brain.
You try to eliminate the very top tier of leadership to throw the entire state apparatus into chaos.
Precisely.
The extent of the structural damage and the casualty figures there are completely unclear at this hour. But from a strategic standpoint, the physical destruction of that specific compound sends a very specific message.
It is not just degrading a military. That looks like a calculated attempt at total regime change.
Right, striking the absolute apex of the Iranian political and religious hierarchy is an attempt to sever the head of the state. It's a move that guarantees a broader, wildly unpredictable fallout compared to those 12-day strikes we saw last year.
And this brings us to a critical juncture in the intelligence we are processing.
The political rhetoric versus the military intelligence.
Exactly. We need to pivot to the political justifications being broadcast out of Washington and subject them to a rigorous, impartial breakdown. The administration is making massive claims regarding the imminent nature of the Iranian threat to justify the sheer scale of tonight's offensive.
We have to separate that political rhetoric from the raw data. President Donald Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have publicly asserted that despite heavy international sanctions, the Iranian government successfully continued to fund and advance its ballistic missile program.
But the immediate trigger for tonight's action comes from U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
Right. Witkoff explicitly claimed that Iran was a mere matter of days away from possessing a weapon capable of striking United States military assets in the region.
A matter of days. That is the stated political justification, an imminent existential threat to American forces.
However, our deep dive into the actual defense intelligence assessments reveals a massive contradiction.
It's a glaring disconnect.
The facts on the ground, as determined by the defense apparatus, simply do not align with the political narrative being presented out of Washington.
And this is perhaps the most crucial element for you to understand as this situation unfolds tonight. We have rigorously analyzed recent United States defense intelligence assessments compiled over the last several weeks and months.
And what do they say?
These military assessments aggressively contradict the claims made by Envoy Witkoff. According to the defense intelligence community, it would take upwards of a decade, not days, but a decade, for Iran to develop a weapon, such as an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of reaching U.S. territory.
A decade. Let's break down why that is. Because building an ICBM isn't just about putting a bigger engine on a rocket.
Not at all. It requires specialized metallurgy, advanced re-entry vehicle shielding, highly complex staging technologies.
And the military's own analysts point out that Iran's capacity to develop those specific technologies was pulverized during the strikes of 2025.
The intelligence indicates that last year's operations inflicted crippling damage on their research facilities and missile silos. The military reality is that Iran simply does not have the intact infrastructure to achieve that capability in a matter of days.
You don't patch together a decade's worth of highly volatile aerospace engineering over a weekend.
Exactly.
So we have an administration claiming an imminent days-away threat and a defense intelligence apparatus stating the capability is a decade away.
And when you see an intelligence disconnect of this magnitude, it forces a strategic reassessment of the entire operation.
If the advanced missile capabilities are simply not there, then imminent threat prevention cannot be the primary driver.
No. It heavily suggests that the true, unstated objective of tonight's coordinated strikes is not containment. It is a kinetic push, meaning the actual dropping of bombs and deployment of military force to fundamentally weaken the regime from the inside out.
Or force a complete overthrow of the Iranian government.
Yes, and the Israeli strikes on the leadership compounds we discussed earlier align perfectly with this theory.
That theory is further bolstered by direct appeals being broadcast right now to the Iranian public. We are seeing reports cross the wire that Donald Trump has explicitly asked the Iranian people to take over their government.
We are seeing that from multiple sources.
Furthermore, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated on the record that this military operation is designed to create the conditions in which Iranians can, quote, create their own fate.
We are talking about open calls for a civilian uprising.
But we need to look at the grim, tactical realities of forced regime change. It is never as simple as toppling the leader and watching democracy bloom.
It is extraordinarily dangerous, highly unpredictable, and almost never goes according to a neat political timeline.
Right.
If you want to understand the reality of what is being proposed tonight, look at the sobering historical analysis of United States operations in the Middle East over the last 20 years. The direct parallel here is Iraq.
Iraq in 2003.
Exactly. I have been analyzing notes from former White House national security experts this week, and their warnings are uniform and dire. Whether a government falls via a military coup or a civilian uprising spurred by outside military pressure, it invariably creates a massive power vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum. When Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party was dismantled in Iraq, the state didn't magically transition to a peaceful republic overnight.
Far from it.
That vacuum was immediately filled by the most aggressive, heavily armed, and extreme factions available. You run the risk of a highly dangerous syndicate seizing control of the state's remaining apparatus.
And you have to consider the specific architecture of the adversary we are talking about today. Iran's internal state apparatus is vastly different from other nations that have faced uprisings.
It's heavily fortified.
Very much so. Despite the internal unrest we saw earlier this year, where civilian protests were met with a remarkably bloody, ruthlessly efficient crackdown, Iran maintains a formidable, deeply entrenched military infrastructure.
Organizations like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
The IRGC, yes, and the Bassi paramilitary forces. These units are specifically designed to withstand external pressure and crush internal dissent. They have decades of experience doing exactly that.
Therefore, encouraging a civilian uprising while bombs are dropping without a clear, actionable plan for what comes after the Ayatollah falls is like highly volatile strategy. You are asking civilians to rise up against a wounded, cornered, heavily armed state security apparatus.
I need to interrupt you right there. We have breaking reports of retaliation crossing the wire right now.
Let's get that on screen.
The Iranian regime has just released a statement declaring they are, quote, firing on all cylinders. Tehran's response is already manifesting, and early indicators show it is vastly larger than the engagements we witnessed in 2025.
Looking at the live feeds, we are seeing a massive, multi-pronged retaliation. Iran has launched wave after wave of suicide drones and ballistic missiles directed toward Israel.
They are in the air as we speak.
At this exact moment, those incoming waves are being engaged by the Iron Dome missile defense system and intercepted by the Israeli Air Force.
It's a saturation tactic.
Meaning they are overwhelming the system.
Exactly. They are firing so many relatively cheap drones at once that the Iron Dome's tracking computers and interceptor stockpiles simply get overwhelmed trying to process them all. The goal is to exhaust the defensive grid, allowing the heavier, far more destructive ballistic missiles to slip through and hit their targets.
But the strikes are not limited to Israel. We are getting confirmations right now that the conflict has immediately expanded across the region.
United States military assets are being hit.
We can confirm that bases located in Bahrain have been struck. Furthermore, Iranian missiles have been launched deep into Qatar and the United Arab Emirates.
We are looking at a localized conflict that has, in a matter of hours, exploded into a regional crisis.
Officials in the UAE have just confirmed the death of at least one individual, a casualty caused by falling debris from an intercepted Iranian missile.
This is no longer a hypothetical escalation. Blood has been spilled in neighboring allied states.
And it is crucial to understand why this specific geographic spread matters to you right now. Bahrain is home to the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet.
A massive installation.
And Qatar hosts Al Udeid Air Base, which is the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East. This isn't just missiles hitting empty desert. This is striking the very nervous system of American power projection in the region.
By expanding their targeting to include these nations, Iran is placing thousands of American forces directly in the crosshairs.
This is the exact nightmare scenario military planners fear.
It is a rapid, tit-for-tat escalation that drags the United States out of a supportive or degraded role and directly into a protracted, sprawling regional war. Iran has drawn a very clear line in the sand tonight, vowing that this aggressive retaliation will continue unceasingly as long as the U.S. and Israel maintain their strikes.
And the shockwaves of this escalation are hitting capitals around the world. Let's run through the immediate global and diplomatic fallout we are tracking in our source wires.
It's a deeply fractured global response.
In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney has issued a statement supporting the strikes as a necessary measure to reduce terror originating from Iran, but he is urgently pleading for restraint to prevent the outbreak of a globalized war.
European leaders are watching the skies over Tehran with extreme caution. The diplomatic channels are flooded with urgent calls from the EU demanding an immediate de-escalation of hostilities.
But perhaps the most telling diplomatic critique tonight is coming out of Finland, and it highlights a massive shift in the global order.
Yes. Finnish officials have publicly pointed out a major, unprecedented break in international diplomatic protocol.
They are noting that the United States acted entirely out of tradition tonight. The U.S. bypassed any coordination with the United Nations and seemingly kept even its closest European allies completely out of the loop regarding the timing and scope of this massive offensive.
Now, from a purely tactical standpoint, you can understand why a U.S. administration might risk that isolation.
To maintain operational security.
Right. If you take a preemptive strike plan to the UN Security Council, it inevitably leaks, or it gets immediately vetoed by adversaries like Russia or China. Bypassing that system ensures the element of surprise.
But the cost of that operational security is total diplomatic isolation. That approach carries massive geopolitical risks. It means the United States and Israel are carrying the entirety of the burden for whatever happens next.
Because if this spirals into a protracted regional war, allied nations may be highly hesitant to provide support, given they were frozen out of the initial decision-making process.
They won't want to clean up a mess they weren't consulted on.
Exactly. And that diplomatic isolation internationally is heavily mirrored domestically. We are seeing a deeply divided, completely fractured political response within Washington right now.
And maintaining our impartial lens here, the domestic political calculus is fascinating. Republicans are publicly lauding President Trump's decisive, kinetic action against Tehran.
Conversely, Democrats are sounding a massive alarm regarding the unacceptably high risk of American casualties and regional destabilization.
To understand the gravity of this domestic split, you have to look at the massive political risk this operation presents. We must remind the listener of the core tenets of the 2024 election.
The America First platform.
Exactly. Donald Trump ran his presidential campaign heavily on an anti-interventionist platform. He explicitly promised to keep the United States out of drawn-out, endless Middle Eastern wars.
The prospect we are staring at tonight, A protracted, bloody conflict involving multiple nations and the highly probable loss of American life represents a massive fundamental reversal of that campaign promise.
And we are entering an upcoming midterm election year.
If American casualties begin to mount at the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain or at Al Udeid in Qatar, it presents a staggering political vulnerability for the Republican Party.
The domestic appetite for a new Middle Eastern war is incredibly low.
The administration has bet immense political capital on the assumption that these strikes will result in a rapid, clean degradation of the Iranian regime. If that bet fails, and this turns into a grinding regional conflict, the domestic fallout will be just as severe as the geopolitical one.
We are looking at a world on the precipice. Let's quickly recap the razor's edge we are currently resting on. We have ongoing coordinated military strikes aimed directly at the heart of Iran's political and military leadership.
Right.
We have glaring, irreconcilable contradictions between the administration's stated political justification and the military's actual defense intelligence assessments.
A decade versus days.
We are witnessing immediate, deadly regional retaliation with drones and missiles raining down across the Middle East, striking allied nations and already claiming lives. And we are seeing a global and domestic response that is deeply, fundamentally divided.
As we continue to monitor these live feeds and source reports, I want to leave you with one final urgent strategic consideration.
Go ahead.
As you watch the skies over the Middle East tonight, consider the scenario. What happens if the Iranian regime doesn't neatly fall, but simply fractures?
The power vacuum.
Yes. If the central command structure in Tehran breaks down under the weight of these bunker-busting munitions weapons designed to penetrate deep underground before detonating, the state apparatus might dissolve. But regime collapse does not erase the weapons. It merely removes the locks.
Leaving the arsenal completely vulnerable.
Exactly. In the chaos of a fractured state, who physically takes control of their remaining ballistic arsenal, their drone factories, and their chemical assets tomorrow morning?
We will continue to track the incoming waves of retaliation and the battle damage assessments out of Tehran. This situation remains highly fluid and extremely dangerous. We are staying on the wire. Stand by for further intelligence.